good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Cosmin Nada, and I'm a researcher at the University Institute of Lisbon and a member of the Quality and Advice Committee of the INESET network, one of the organizers of today's webinar. The webinar will be dedicated to a very relevant topic, often discussed at both policy and practical levels, and is entitled, "What is the impact of smartphones and social media restrictions on education? Evidence from schools in Europe?" In recent years, and especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all remember very well, there has been a growing concern with the well-being of children and young people. As a result, the European Commission has set up an informal expert group that has launched in 2024 a set of guidelines for policymakers and educators on supporting well-being at schools. And my colleagues will place the link to this document in the chat so that you can consult it later. Recently, a child-friendly version of the guidelines on mental health and well-being at school, together with the full report of the Informal Commission Expert Group on Supportive Learning Environments and Well-being at School, were published, and the corresponding links will also follow in the chat. However, as we all know, the challenge of ensuring children's and young people's well-being at school and beyond has been heavily amplified by the widespread use of digital tools and platforms. In response, some countries have recently introduced stricter measures, including partial or total bans on smartphones in schools, in face of which education stakeholders remain quite divided. Some agree with the bans, while others are quite passionately against them. The webinar today will delve into this complex matter and provide an overview of the current evidence, combining research findings with policy and implementation perspectives. Now, I will give the floor to Marco Montanari for a formal introduction to this webinar on behalf of the European Commission. Marco Montanari works as the Director General for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture, and he is also the Commission Scientific Coordinator of the INESET network. Marco, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Cosmin, and good afternoon and a warm welcome to all participants, also from the European Commission, in particular the Director General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, known as DG EAC. This is the fourth webinar of our EAC Research to Policy series on education that we organized together with our expert network on economics and sociology of education and training, known as INESET. Now, you won't hear any acronym from me. Let's go now into more the policy dimension of today's topic. So, Cosmin was already explaining that digital tools have transformed the way students learn and connect, but there are also growing concern about the possible effects on both academic performance and well-being. So let's think, for instance, of the declining performance in international tests like PISA, but also others, and its clear correlation with digital distraction. Let's think also of findings we have seen on the relationship between massive use of digital tools and well-being. And concerning well-being in particular, I want to mention that the European Commission adopted on the 10th of February, so just 2 days ago, explicitly on the Safer Internet Day, an action plan against cyberbullying. This plan focuses on two main aims. The first one is delivering tools to empower children and young people to identify and report cyberbullying. And the second aim is providing comprehensive offline and online support. So against this background, today's webinar, really, we wanted to bring together cutting-edge research. You will hear about new causal evidence on how smartphones and social media affect academic performance, but also real-world policy experience. We want to go, we want to move beyond slogans and simple answers. Today's webinar will offer a nuanced discussion of what quantitative and qualitative evidence can and cannot tell us about the design and implementation of smartphone and social media restrictions in schools across Europe. I'm sure we will not leave this webinar with one-size-fits-all solutions. but with plenty of food for thought, whether you are a policymaker, a practitioner, a researcher, or maybe also a parent of school-age children. But now it's time to leave the floor to our speakers and dive into our presentations and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marco, for this great introduction to the topic and for sharing the resources that were launched recently by the European Commission. Before I give the floor to our distinguished speakers, I would like to clarify how the webinar will be structured. So we will have 3 presentations. They will not exceed 15 minutes, so they will be very short and condensed information. So I invite the now 112 people who are attending the webinar to pay a lot of attention during the presentations, because you will receive very useful information in little time. And after these presentations, we will have a discussion together with the 3 speakers. And here again, I invite all webinar attendees to enter. At the time, we will have a link to a Padlet through which you will be able to ask questions, provide comments and insights, and this will be reflected on the screen at the time. And finally, at the very end of the webinar, we will have a moment for questions. And there, I invite all of you to ask questions in writing in the chat. You can ask them throughout the webinar or at the very end, and then some of these questions will be selected and discussed with the speakers before we close. So now I would like to introduce the first speaker of our webinar, who is Giovanni Maria Abbiati, an associate professor in economic sociology at the University of Brescia, who will share the results of a counterfactual analysis of the impact of smartphones and social media on student academic performance. So Giovanni, you have 12 to 15 minutes, please. You are muted.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's say 12, so I can go for 15 actually. So thank you very much. Let's share. Do you see my screen?
Yes, great.
Perfectly. So, oops. Okay, thank you very much. So thanks for the introduction and for the invitation. There was various elements of your introduction that have given me ideas on how to start. The first thing is that today I will present an empirical research on the causal effect of early social network use on learning outcomes. And something that has been said, I think it is really important. What is happening now interrogates us not only as researchers or policymakers, but also as educators, as many of us are, and as parents, so or grandparents or aunts and uncles. So actually, I think that this is something that many of us has experienced. We saw in these years a lot of conflicting studies, conflicting guidelines, what you should do with your kids, what you should do with your students, etc., etc., etc. And the aim of our research work was to start to have some firm points on some very specific elements. That is, how can we isolate the impact of social media on student competences? Because many of what has been discussed is related to this issue, and also we wanted to understand whether educational inequalities were affected somehow by early social network use. But first, before going to our research, I would like to spend just 2 or 3 minutes relating to the debate about media minors and school outcomes, because it is progressing very fast as technology is progressing very fast. Probably many of us will remember the early 2000s, where there was an era that now sociologists call technological optimism, where every type of problem at the very onset of internet seemed to be possible to be solved thanks to technology. Anything from education, from schooling, from lots of other problems or societal issues. Now, what we're seeing actually is that we are witnessing a pushback. This pushback is mostly driven by, on the one hand, by research results, and on the other hand, by what we are experiencing, that is basically a change in the technological infrastructure that is governing the online space, especially the social network. For those of you that remember, it seems a century ago, but everybody was very positive about social networks until at least 2017, when there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Then there was the UNESCO report about the dubious advantages of technology in education. And then I think that many of us saw this type of documentary that was the first of a series. Now, what is the evidence telling us? Well, the first thing is that it is very difficult to conduct research on this topic because, as I said, technology changes very fast, and it is also difficult, if not unethical, to run randomized controlled trial that are the golden, well, we can say the golden standard of empirical evidence. So what we know so far is that we have evidence of some links of some specific aspects of technology to some types of behaviors, like, for instance, screen time and school performances, screen time and distraction, and but there seem to be pieces on a puzzle. What we lacked was something that was the impact of the age of first autonomous use. And this was a big gap in knowledge, because if you pay attention, this is actually the key topic of the public debate. Everyone is concerned, especially with what is the appropriate age to start giving your kids a smartphone or to letting them open a social media. This is actually the virtually 90% of the public discussion revolves around an issue for which we had, until recently, no evidence. So what we did with this project, funded by Fondazione Cariplo and headed by the University of Milan Bicocca, it is called Eyes Up, Early Exposure to Screens and Unequal Performances. It is a project that we conducted in the Italian region of Lombardy. And we have also some partners, well, my university, and we have also two research centers, Slow Working and Socialis, that were part of our network. And we basically asked us two questions. So the first one is, what is the impact, long-term impact of the age of first autonomous use on academic outcomes? This was the first one. And whether we have evidence that this impact differs across social groups, because also we know that the type of use of social media, of screen time, differs according to lines, according to the traditional lines of sex, social background, and migratory background. So what we did, really, in a nutshell, we took a sample of grade 10 and 11 students from 5 provinces in Lombardy. So grade 10 and 11 means that the students were 15, 16 when we interviewed them in 5 provinces, and we had about 6,600 respondents. And then we did 2 things. The first thing that we did was that we administered during school hour and in presence of a trained educator a web survey. Among the various things that we asked, there was the first the grade that they were in when they opened their first social media account. And then what we did was that we linked this data with the Invalsi data. That Invalsi is the National Italian Institute for the Evaluation of the School System. So we have population data on competences on grades 2, that is second year of primary school, grade 5, which is the 5th year, grade 8, which is the third year of lower secondary school, and then grade 10. So we had a complete school career for about 5,400 students. And the first thing that we noticed is that we were worried that the students were afraid of telling us the true age at which they were opening a social media account. But actually what we found is that theoretically for our GDPR, the correct age for, I don't know if you see my cursor. Okay.
Yes.
The correct age is 9th grade or later. That is high school, scuole superiori in Italian. But less than one student in 5 actually waits that long. We have that one student in 10 open a social media profile while they are in primary school. The median age is 6th grade when they also get a smartphone. And then we see that, by the way, the vast majority of students during middle school, when it should be forbidden, they open a social media profile. And we wanted to know whether this type of behavior is harmful or not as concern student competencies. Because, as I said, Invalsi tests students in English, mathematics, in Italian, in all the grades that I told you before. So to make the story more simple, also for this presentation, we contrasted this group, the group that waited until until the law would allow them, theoretically. We contrasted them with all these groups, but especially for the sake of this conversation, we will show you the results of those that opened it in the median age. That's also today the most common age at which the student open a social media profile. So this is the most salient comparison. And what do we do? Much of the evidence that we had, it was not causal, that is, it was correlational. So we saw that the more the screen time, the less the student competences, but it was unclear whether one was causing the other. So we did 2 things. First, we employed a technique called statistical matching to be sure to be comparing similar people. Because we know that if you open a social media after 3 years, probably you have a different family, you have a different background, you have already a different starting level in your competencies. So we match them, especially on previous performance. That is, students that were very similar, and then we observe using the second technique, which is difference in differences, how the variations in our outcome, that is, student competencies, is affected by the event that we study, that is the opening of a social media profile. So to be very clear, we given that for non-statistician, that it is important to be very clear, we estimate the effect of 3 years of social media profile during middle school exclusively on the Invalsi competences in Italian, English, and mathematics. And and these are the results. For those that are not used to graphical representation, I will guide you to these that are more important results. So first, we have 3 graphs, one for Italian, one for mathematics, and one for English. In each of these graphs, we have 2 lines. The blue line represent the students that waited until the legal age, okay? That are this one. While in green, we have the students that opened the social media profile just after they took the test at the end of primary school. So these are the lines. These are the panels represent the different subjects. Now, on the x-axis, we have the 3 data collection points. So here there were the competences of this group of students some years before. That is when they were in primary school, just at the beginning of primary school. Here, they were perfectly matched on their competencies year 5. And then here we have when they are 14 in grade 8, and so these lines represent the evolution of competencies across these 3 points. What do we have on the y-axis of each graph? We have standardized skills from minus 0.2 to 0.2. I will come back to explain what actually these numbers mean. And then we have some interesting points that I want to comment before going to the effect. This point is the same for the 2 groups because we matched students that on average were exactly the same. But we also wanted to know whether their evolution was similar. So we, here in primary school, we looked at whether they were also similar 3 years before. And we are reassured that we are talking about the impact of a genuine causal impact, because as you see, the 2 groups were virtually indistinguishable when they were in the 2nd year of primary school, okay? Then what happens, the effect of social media can be retrieved by looking at whether these 2 dots differ and whether these bars do not overlap. If they do not overlap, we have sufficient evidence that we are in front of a social media effect. So you see that in both Italian and mathematics, their results are surprisingly similar, and they are about 0.2 on average in favor of the students that waited. Okay? Students that waited perform much better, while we do not see much on English. And why that? Well, many explanations have been put forth, like distraction, etc., etc., and they are widely discussed. The fact that we do not find much on English, the effect is very small and not statistically significant. We hypothesize that given that the average number of hours that the students, the average number of hours that the student pass online on social media is about 5. And much of the content is in English, especially it comes from the US or it has been translated. So we think that somehow this is kind of a training, involuntary training in English while you spend so many hours each day on social networks. Now, how much is 0? Yeah, I'm
Giovanni,
looking at the time.
just to warn you that you should really wrap up in 2 minutes if possible. Thank you.
I'm looking. Yeah, 15 minutes. So how much is 0.2? Here I'm giving some terms of references, but it is half of a year of learning. Just to give you a reference, the male-female divide or gender gap, as it is commonly known, is less than 0.2. It is on average in our data is 0.15, 0.18. So to wrap up, we find a strong negative effect in mathematics and Italian. We also made other comparisons, and we found that the earlier the social media comes, the more negative the effect. So those who had in grade 7 have a negative effect, a discernible negative effect, but is less strong. And also, when we look at the differences between social groups, this is a problem particularly pronounced for males. The effect on males is much stronger than on females that have an effect but less strong. And we tried to test whether it was due to some specific feature, content, or something like that. We couldn't really conduct a causal analysis, but what we observed, it was that smartphone pervasiveness mediated the effects. The more you use, the more often you use smartphones in moments of your life that are not where you're supposed not to use your smartphone, like when you're doing homework, before going to bed, while doing sports, etc., the more negative is your effect. On the other hand, monitoring tools that were installed by parents seem to matter much little. I went 2 minutes longer. I'm sorry, but thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you so much, Giovanni, for sharing the results of your study. I think we could clearly see in this slide with the graphics that you explained that it is indeed a very relevant contribution to what we know at this current stage. And your presentation was very clear in showing that starting earlier, or what we can consider too early, has a negative impact on academic results, while there is also some complexity there, especially when you were talking about English, but very, very important results for sure. Now we will move to the second presentation from Stephanie Kreter. She is the lead author of the INESET report that you heard about, and you will also receive the link now in the chat on mobile phones restrictions in schools. And Stephanie will present the findings of this study that are summarized in the report, which map policies across EU member states and also analyze their implementation through in-depth case studies in France, Hungary, Italy, and Sweden. So mapping policies concerning the phone ban, smartphone ban restrictions that have been increasing in different countries. Stephanie, you also have 12 to 15 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Cosmin, and thank you so much, everyone, for having me here. I will be sharing my screen now. Can you confirm that you see it?
It's coming up. Yes, now we can see it in full screen. Great.
Great. So I'm really pleased to present the result of this collective work, which is on mobile phone bans, as Cosmin highlighted, in schools across the EU. I think Giovanni has already pictured very well the key elements of the debate, so I will not delve too much into details on that. But he has as well shown us the evidence of why restriction really matters. And our INESET study didn't really want to go too much into details on that. Of course, we highlighted a little bit, but we really wanted to distinguish when countries actually implement phone bans or phones restrictions, what happens in practice. That was the main question we were trying to answer. So I will go fast on our methodology. Our work had two components. So first, we had a mapping of mobile phone policy across all the 27 EU member states. And second, we wanted to have more of a qualitative overview of what was actually happening in 4 key countries. So we had France, Hungary, Italy, and Sweden. There we conducted interviews with ministry officials, school leaders, and teachers, of course, and in some cases as well students when it was possible. Again, I want to stress that we are not positioning ourselves as whether to, if the school should really or should not impose bans or restriction. Our objective was really only to observe what was the implementation, how it was working, and understand what would be the consequences, being positive or negative, as well as the possible unintended consequences. The 4 case study countries were selected to represent overall diverse policy approaches, as well implementation timelines. So we had Sweden, who was a bit of an outlier, and you will see it in our map right after, because themselves they have not yet implemented at national level, contrary to the 3 other countries, but they have implemented at school level for now. And as well, the 4 countries have started implementation of full day school bans. So one important caveat as well that I want to raise is that contrary to Giovanni's study, we will really present rather perceived impacts and not any form of statistical evidence. So our case study are really more exploratory, illustrative, and as mentioned, not statistically representative. But we thought that it was really important because it helps really to have an overview of what are the implementation realities. So here, the first result of our mapping is that looking at the European landscape, by late 2025, we can see that the majority of EU member states have actually implemented some form of mobile phone restriction. So we have, for example, full school day ban, which becomes more and more the norm, as we can see here, for example, in Belgium, France, Portugal, but as well, the other elements are the classroom ban, which are in countries like the Netherlands, Romania, and Slovakia. The most common model we identified was the one that we called conditional restriction, where phones are overall banned by default by the school, but some exceptions are permitted, generally for medical needs, for special educational needs, and of course as well for educational purposes. So Italy, in this case, and that's one of the reasons why we chose it, it stands as the strictest case because phones are banned even for educational purposes. So now let me present a bit more what we have discovered in those case study and in our interview. So first, an important element is the improved classroom climate. Teachers across all the case studies have really reported that there was a fewer interruption, less micro distraction coming from the notification from the phone, more calm and focus in the classroom. As well, some teachers actually highlighted that they had more eye contact with their students. So this was really interesting as well. Overall, we can see that there is a reduce in cognitive distractions. The second, and it was probably the one that was the most recurrently cited benefits by all the stakeholders and all the interviewees, is that there is enhanced social interaction. School leaders and teachers really consistently described a sense of resocialization of the playground. There is this forced separation from the device really felt like there was more face-to-face interaction with the students, more playing. So students started playing ping pong, if the material was available, card games, having conversation with each other. Another element that I think it's very much in time with the action plan against cyberbullying is this, there was a perceived reduction in in-school cyberbullying. And it's really important as well because it was highlighted as one of the key rationale for a lot of governments. And this is, of course, overseen at the EU level as the mobile phone were one of the solutions to reduce cyberbullying in some countries, especially in France, where it was very much a center of the discussion. So from our interviews, teachers reported that there were fewer perceived incidents of filming, as well less sharing of inappropriate images from the students of each other, but as well of teachers, and potentially as well less bullying outside of the school, even though that was reported only in France. Finally, and that's something that doesn't always feature in the debate, at least in how we have seen, but we think that it's something that emerged very strongly in our interviews, is that there is a really perceived impact on teacher well-being. Really, teachers described that they felt that there was a form of relief from this constant policing or surveillance anxiety. The teacher didn't feel like it was their burden to check what students had to always not have their phone on them if it was classroom ban before. They really had this pain was actually put on non-teaching staff, where it was at the beginning of the school where teacher or non-teaching staff had to collect the phone, and therefore the teacher didn't have to worry about that anymore. But now, and I already highlighted a little bit, I want to go on what were the challenges and unintended consequences. And I think it's really important because you can see that some seems to talk to each other, and it really, those elements really had a layer of complexity, because we see that the benefits sometimes actually are counterbalanced by sometimes strong negative implication for some students. So the first one, I think the most important one, is the logistical burden. There is overall a high strain on non-teaching staff, as well on school leaders and on the school overall for daily collection or for putting in place a storage location for the devices. As well, there was a big question of liability for theft or damage. So some students said that in their opinion, their mobile phone was actually costing more than their teacher salary. So they really felt like it was very important for them that their that their phone was not damaged or not, stolen, of course. So you can see that for the students, it was very important question, the question of liability. Government overall, it seemed to not really have provided clear funding for this implementation. So whether it would be for storage lockers, for pouches, or even for simple collection boxes. So in France overall, there was a survey of school leaders, and while most of them were really happy with the ban, they said that in their opinion, at least only 8% said that they would actually implement the ban at the start of the year in 2025. So meaning that most of them decide that it was actually at the moment too difficult to implement, or as well it was just they were awaiting for further resources from the government. There was another effect of that we call the substitution effect, where some students actually simply shift their use of mobile phone and non-educational use of mobile phone from their phone to tablets or laptops. So of course, this really defeats the purposes, and there is a question of the school to actually ensure that all the devices will not be used for non-educational purposes. I did mention that there was a reduction in cyberbullying in school, but in most of the case study that we had, it seemed that there were actually a shift in after-school hours of the cyberbullying. We really, at least in those three countries, so as I mentioned, except France, it seemed that there is not really a full elimination, but probably more displacement, again, from the interviewee's perspective. And there was the question of overcompensation, with some interviewees actually reporting that in either students or teacher, that it seemed that the phone was more used at home. So meaning that the students were actually making up for the lost screen time during the school hours. So of course, it does raise genuine concerns for their health, and the first element being around sleep deprivation. But something that we felt being probably the most interesting part of our analysis was the question on equity concerns. So our analysis actually had identified what we can call a compliance gap. It came from the Swedish educators who actually estimated that for roughly 80% of the students, the ban actually worked quite well, seemed to have the positive effect intended. But for the remaining 20%, the device actually does not, of course, resolve underlying issues, but as well can create a form of conflict, erode somehow the trust that they could have had for the teaching staff, and really overall created more tensions, and could transform what was before rather classroom management issues into more disciplinary actions. So I will walk you through the different groups that we identified as those 20% who might suffer a little bit from the ban. So the first one would be the socially isolated students. So those actually use their phone as a form of social shield. They said that they felt that the connection to friends inside the classroom or inside the school were not fully possible, or they did not feel very connected. So the phone was actually a big social connection to their friends that were not present at the moment. So removing it really, in their case, felt like a feeling of exclusion. So as you can see in the quote at the bottom of the slide, a student actually told us that they don't feel like the mobile phone policy is bad, but that without any friends in the class, the classroom now felt, and the school breaks actually felt very bad for them. So this really tells us on a policy perspective that there is really it's really important when you put into place those kind of bans or of restriction that you need to invest in structured break time activities, first of all, and as well you need to offer support for those students who may have some may need some social integration support. Another at-risk group was students from disadvantaged background, where their phone often is their only connection to the internet. They're as well less able to circumvent the rules, and so it actually really creates an unequal playing field in a way. And in infrastructure poor schools, sometimes the phone was actually the only connection to the internet, the only solution to a slow internet that sometimes happens. So banning them would, without providing a concrete school-managed device, was probably creating a huge risk for widening the digital divide that could already exist. And as well, a key important message is to not pass the cost, of course, to the family. For the others, the students with medical needs or special educational needs are generally accommodated through exception, but there is a need for clear protocol to avoid any form of stigmatization of these students. And finally, the last group was older adolescent, where overly they were saying that for them the ban was fully absurd and infantilizing, and there is a very high non-compliance rate from them and higher resistance, sometimes up to 90%. So, of course, for them, there is, as a solution, the idea of considering age-differentiated approaches, but as well, and I think that's the main element we want to highlight here, is that there is a need to involve students in shaping and co-designing the rule so that they feel that they are part of this ban and see it as a negotiated responsibility rather than a full restriction. And to finalize, because I realize I'm a bit over time, so to conclude, we are again not positioning ourselves on whether countries should or should not ban phones. The research, and Giovanni has highlighted it as well, there is a positive effect. But even they can impact probably the majority of the students, but those benefits coexist as well with very unintended consequences and real risk for most of the, for a lot of vulnerable students. So bans really need to be embedded within broader strategies, being digital literacy, parental engagement to address what happens outside the school, because it's probably the biggest element to discuss, and as well targeted support for students who may experience the ban differently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you also for almost complying with the time limit. I think your presentation complemented very well Giovanni's presentation by bringing this qualitative view and the perceptions of all these educational actors, and showcasing how complex this topic is, no? Because there are indeed certain benefits that materialize rather quickly according to your results after the mobile phone bans are implemented, but then they are much more complex and they do not apply to all students and the whole school community in the same way, and there are even some negative effects of the phone bans that can emerge. So the approaches here need to be indeed very well thought through, and I would say even more adapted to the reality of different schools. And this gives us the perfect moment to invite our next speaker to tell us more about how this has been implemented in practice and in recent developments concerning mobile phone use in schools, particularly in Spain. So we will hear from Julio Jimeno Albalad, who is Director of the National Institute of Educational Technologies and Teacher Training. And as I mentioned, he has been working on recent developments in the regulation of mobile phone use in schools in Spain and will share his knowledge with us. Julio, you also have 12 to 15 minutes. Thank you. You are muted.
Thank you. I'm going to start your share. Please tell me if it works.
Yes.
It's okay?
Not yet. Yes, now it's in full screen. Perfect.
Okay, so thank you very much. First of all, I want to try to explain why we were in the map that Stephanie saw. We are not regulated by the national law because, as you know, Spain is a uncentralized country, and education is in the hands of the regions. We have regions that they are called autonomous communities, and while the basic element of the law of education that are related with the curricula is established by the ministry, many things in their hands, absolutely in the hands of the regions, and is the case of the ICTs and the relation with the ICTs and the education regulation of this kind of elements. So in Spain, the 17 autonomous communities has the competence about the regulation of the use of the device in the school and is mentioned in our basic law of education. This is the photo
Julio,
of the...
sorry, we are not seeing the full presentation and the slide change. I think you have to go back to the full presentation, yeah? Okay. Or even put it in a slideshow presentation.
You can see it like that?
Yes, now it's changing.
Okay, perfect. Good. Yes, I was thinking that it was on the other side. Okay, so as I said, this is the basic law that say that it's in the hands of the educational administration. It means that it's in the hands of the regions, and we have these pictures of the two maps. One was the before 2024, and the second one was at the end of the 2025. And you have to know that many of the changes that it happened then. For example, some of the countries that Stephanie mentioned before, they start to change and regulate the use of mobile phones in Spain. Just two regions, Madrid and Galicia, regulate then in 2023 the use of mobile phones, and usually they say that it is forbidden. Just in case of the specific situations like the pedagogical use, but the rest of that is forbidden for the students. And at the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024, all of the regions start to regulate that on their own, and they have similar situation. They say that is ban the use of mobile phone in the classroom and in the schools, and they also start to regulate the use that in the extracurricular activities that they didn't say before. In specific situations that Stephanie said that they can use, like medical or students with special abilities, and also with pedagogical use, always justified by the teacher and the schools, they can use that. You can see two of the regions that they are Castilla y León and Basque Country, that they let in the hands of the schools the decision to how to regulate, but it's mandatory for them to the regulation of the mobile phones in the schools. I took two examples of this use of this regulation. We have one in Murcia and another one in Madrid. Both of them publish a new law about the use of not just mobile phones, and also the regulation of digital devices and the relation with digitalization in the schools for all their schools. And one example is the case of Murcia. They publish a digital well-being guide, and they talk about not just about mobile phones, but they just start to talk about avoiding the passive digital consumption, or start to talk about screen times. And also Madrid, that they said is banned the use of mobile phones in all situations, and except in a case that the teacher and the school justify this use and is prepared before to tell the parents that that the mobile phones will be used for educational uses. And also they mix with some relation with the use of digital devices, the regular digital devices, tablets or computers. And they said that for early childhood and primary education, they can't use that, and when they start secondary school, they can start to use that. And also they said the individual use of these devices is forbidden for the primary schools, and they need to be used with 2 of the students at least. It's not just about the relation of the digital schools by the mobile phones for the autonomic point of view. We are also developing a new law about the protection of the minors in digital environments. We're talking about our president 2 weeks ago said that it's going to be forbidden for the students, for the younger than 16 years old to access a social media application, and part of this organic law is mandatory for the regions and the schools, the regulation of the use of the mobiles, but it's interesting because they mentioned that it's not just about the use of the mobile in the classroom, it's also about the extracurricular activities and also the supervised break times for the students. As Stephanie said, we have been seeing many benefits for these changes, but also we have many of the challenges that Stephanie mentioned, and I want to emphasize some of them. In our case, we have some doubts about this regulation. When I say we, I mean the ministry. We agree with the regulation, and we did in our specific schools that we control. They are in the north part of Africa and in the small cities called Melilla. We have done the use of the mobiles in the schools, except in pedagogical exceptions and also for medical situations. But also, we have a reflection about the consequences of this regulation, because it could be increasing the digital divide, because some of our students, they are in economic and social specific situation, and maybe just is the school when they can see this safe and responsible use of digital devices. So it's interesting to think about that, because this break with the reality, and it could be a negative exposition for some students that they don't have this reference at home. Also, it's a challenge the support for the teachers. You can say mandatory that it's going not to be permit the use of mobile phones, but we need to give the power to the teachers to implement these regulations. Also, for us, is interesting the consequences of this regulation, because, as I said, many of the regulation was mixed between the use of the mobiles and also the use of the digital devices, and it means that at the end the debate is not about mobile phones or social media. It means it mix everything between screens, and it's really hard to debate about the screens in education, because you are putting in the same bag all the relation with the digitalization, and we think we need to divide the debate. And it's not the same to talking about TikTok or talking about the use of one-per-one devices, or the use of presentation or any 3D print at class, and all of them are part of digitalization, but of course all of them are not the same for education. And as both of my colleagues said before, we have a challenge related not just about education. We have to realize that 30% of the hours of a student of the secondary school in Spain is just passing in the schools. So the rest of their lives are out of the school. So we need to go with the hand of the rest of the society. Of course, it's part of our responsibility in education, but we need to reflect about that. And maybe a kind of idea that we can see what is being saying Stephanie and Carlo, the idea that this radical change is going to, maybe it has a consequences that we can reflect about the gradual changes, and what we are doing in Spain trying to implement these changes. We have developed a new law, as I said before, and as part of this new law, we established the basic competence for the students, and one of that was the digital competence. And we said that at the end of the mandatory education, at the end of the secondary education, our students will have this digital competence that involves the safe, the healthy, the sustainable, the critical, and the responsible use of digital technologies. And as part of these digital technologies, we need to mention that it's going to be the mobile phones and the social media. So it's essential to have part of the curricula, some subjects related with that. But it is impossible without the teachers. For that, we have been doing some changes in Spain. Based on the proposal of the European Commission, Comedu, we developed a new framework, a specific Spanish framework developed by all the regions and the ministry, and we established different levels that you possibly know. And different levels, it means that how is the use of technology not as a citizen but as a teacher. So we established the different levels, and the idea is that we need to train the teachers to help the students in the use of the digital technologies. And it has different areas related, all of them with the labor of the work of the job of the teachers. And finally, for us, we start to teach the teachers about digitalization so many years ago, but we made a big effort the last 4 years, and from 2021 to 2025 we start to certify the teachers and in the digital competence, and we have more than 8% of the teachers in Spain certified by this framework at CB4. And finally, as part of this relation with the mobile phones and the rest of the digital technologies, all the schools in Spain, supported by the public funds, they have developed a digital school plan related with the Digcom.org of the European Commission, with the idea to analyze and evaluate the relation with digitalization. They need to do this analysis, this plan, and at the end of this analysis, they need to do another evaluation about this relation. So we have 22,000 schools in Spain with digital school plan in 2025. And with that, I want to thank you and finish my presentation until here.
Thank you so much, Julio. And I think you managed to successfully aggregate all the findings of the previous research that we had the opportunity to listen to by basically showcasing in a very clear way how phone bans alone are not enough. And even though in Spain you are introducing certain form of bans by different regions, you have your doubts about these bans and you keep monitoring and analyzing their impacts and their implementation, but at the same time you are investing in the promotion of digital competencies through these frameworks and the laws that actually ask schools to develop these competencies regardless of a pushback towards digital tools. Digital competencies are still important and need to be developed, and also the investment in teacher training when it comes to this, the graphic that you showed, increasing so much the number of teachers that are trained in this field is indeed very, very impressive. And there was, in fact, a comment in the chat about if mobile phone bans then might lead to forgetting that we have to promote these digital competencies and in a way not doing that anymore because we already banned. And I think this again answers very well these questions, that the bans can be one measure, but then they are complemented with other measures. And banning, while it can have positive effects, it does not mean that we give up the promotion of digital competencies. We can have the phones banned planned in certain times, in certain circumstances, but the objective of developing these competencies is always on the table, and different strategies should be implemented in order to achieve it. So in the remaining time, I want now to invite our 126 webinar attendees to engage with a question that I will reflect on the screen in a few seconds on a Padlet, and you will be able to input your insights, comments through this Padlet through the link that my colleague will place in the chat. And the first question that we are going to explore together is families and local communities play a crucial role in developing healthier mobile phone and social media use in students. Some comments in the chat were also inquiring about families and local communities. So the question is, how can these responsibilities be shared effectively with schools? Concretely, what does it mean, this shared responsibility between schools, families, and local communities, and how does it look in practice, how it can be sustained over time? And here I would start with Julio, because I think in this policy initiatives that you mentioned, certainly the articulation with families and local communities is a concern, and I would like to ask directly precisely this, how this shared responsibility looks in practice in the Spanish context, and how you have been sustaining, or are you trying to sustain it over time? And I will ask all speakers to answer in 2 minutes if possible.
Okay. Yeah, because we are trying to for that, and it's one of the most difficult because we need to share this responsibility with families, but our focus families, I mean the families we need to get closer, the families we need to improve their relation and knowledge about digital competence, usually are more separated from the school and the administration. And this is the hardest part, because if you organize a training for the parents, always are the same parents. It's not your objective, and this is one of the trying to get with the rest of society. So we need the different associations, we need the mayors of the cities to try to get these families, because it's one of the most difficult ideas, because part of the essential, all the elements of the shared responsibility is not to give different information and conflict information. If you are saying something from the school, but the parents of the families are saying the opposite, not because they are looking for the good for the children. I mean, they don't have this digital competence. So this is one of the hardest part. And I don't trying to find the solution, trying to get all of them by the way we need to find.
Thank you so much, Julio, and I will head over to Giovanni, because I think this question on parents and communities is also very relevant to your own research findings, because we are talking about this first contact and opening actually an account on social media, and this changes from family to family, and it's very perhaps even from social and cultural context to different social and cultural contexts. So how would you say researchers and especially policymakers can design this community and family connections in a way that we are all working towards the same objective, which at the end of the day is about promoting well-being and promoting the skills and academic achievement of the students, using the benefits of digital devices, but also avoiding the caveats?
Well, thanks. Well, this is a huge question. I hope that I hope you don't expect me to give a a clear-cut answer on that. But I think that one of the key words that have been pronounced before, and also in the comment section, was the idea of having a shared goal, of having it doesn't come to be the word in English, but the problem is that there are a lot of conflicts in the regulations, in schools, in what parents know, what they can do. Just to give you an example, part of the PNRR funds have to be spent in improving the already very pervasive digitalization of schools of all grades. So buying tablets, buying technological devices also for very young kids. And then at the same time, you ban phones and you start to draft regulations saying that too much digitalization is bad. There is research that say that pencil on paper is better, etc., etc., etc. There is this continuous conflict between regulation that is harmful. To give another example, one of the tools that also have been mentioned in the comments I was reading before is a bottom-up approach of group of parents or citizens, like Wait Until 8th. I don't know how they are called in other regions in Europe, but in Italy they are Patti Digitali. They are a group of parents that decide to postpone the digitalization of the kids, for instance, not giving them a smartphone where they're too young, and they autonomously, this group, decide when it is okay. So there may be some schools in which these parents organize, but then there is a teacher that gives homeworks to do that you cannot do if you do not have a tablet or something, or if you do not use the computer of your parents. And this is not the teacher's fault. It's 15 years that we were pushing on that in schools, and now in some sense we are asking them to make a U-turn. So I think that the key point is to integrate all this in a Unitarian framework, so that the people knows where to go and knows that the school is on their side if they want to take it.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. Actually, you are engaging with some of the comments that were made in the chat, and there are two comments from our attendee, Paula Blackman, who is mentioning an initiative called Wait Until eighth grade. So where parents are invited to consider buying smartphones only after a certain grade, and also this initiative in Germany that she mentions, individual schools that are piloting smartphone-free classes in 5th and 6th grade, and then the parents also sign a self-commitment not to buy a phone until grade 7. So these contradictions that you were mentioning right now about digital devices are important, we should invest in them, but then all of a sudden they are very harmful and we don't want any more, and then parents are invited to buy them and then they are told not to buy them. So there is here a lot of tensions, but this type of articulation between schools and families and parents to work towards a common goal, I think is a very important answer. We have here in the Padlet that you can see also some comments where again school communities and parents agreed that phones would not be given to the children in a certain grade, and then there was no peer pressure, because we know how powerful also peer pressure is. And I would like to give the floor now to Stephanie to react particularly on the same topic of families and communities, but react particularly to this comment of children involvement, and this question on the extent to which the children and the young people were consulted before the phone bans were implemented, according to the results of the study that you conducted.
Thank you, Cosmin. And actually, you read my mind, because I wanted to focus mainly on this one, because I already highlighted that there was this question of the overcompensation effect, and that we saw that there is overall not a reduction of screen time, at least overall, through the mobile phone restrictions. And of course, parental support is essential. But then as well, what seemed to work very well, at least in 2 countries, was that there was quite a strong consultation work being done and involving in one part the parents, of course, so that to know what were they're afraid of. Generally, they were afraid of the children walking from home to school and what could happen then. But as well to have, so it's the concrete case in France where the consultation with students actually highlighted that at first they were quite hesitant, but because they introduced them the ban, the reason why the ban would work, we could actually see an increase in the student support. So I think that's really essential. And as well, what is more important is, I think, again, going into a broader strategy, because, for example, in France, what helped is the idea of the right to disconnect, because then it was put into this broader digital principle where students, we were explaining, okay, this is the reason why we feel that at certain moment of the day, you should maybe not have your phone right now and be able to just say, no, it is not the time for me to contact you as well, because some people were highlighting that teachers then have to as well accept not to be sending anything to the students during their time at home, because some were actually sharing content very late or on Sunday for something on Monday. So as well, something that I wanted to highlight is that some Swedish educators highlighted that phone is, of course, not only a children problem, and I think that is linked to what Giulio and Giovanni were highlighting, is that there is a need to offer a clear and consistent message from all the parties. So from the parents, from the school, and from the local communities, if possible, and share a concrete goal towards reducing your own usage, because sometimes the parents can have as well a negative use of phone. That's my answer.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So again, very well integrated response to answer to the complexity of this matter and the different actors that have to work in the same direction in order to achieve good results. And since we are 2 minutes away from the end of our webinar, we will stay with the current Padlet, and I will invite all attendees to have a very, very close look to the webinar chat, because I saw some colleagues have shared very, very interesting resources, even scientific publications or studies conducted in different countries that are very, very relevant to this discussion. And also, I would perhaps close the webinar with a reflection on one of the points also presented here in the Padlet concerning the use of mobile phones and digital devices for learning, as opposed to the use of these devices for more leisure and interaction purposes. So I think in all this discussion, what becomes clear is that there is a strong distinction to be made between digital tools used for learning purposes and these tools have been shown. There is a lot of research. We had an INESET webinar a few months ago precisely on the potential of digital tools for improving learning outcomes. The research is clear. Digital tools, if well used with the right pedagogies and the necessary training, are very, very powerful tools for learning. And then we have the other side of digital tools used for leisure and socialization purposes, and that's also fine as long as it is in a healthy amount, and also it does not contribute to distractions inside the school and inside the classrooms. And then the phone bans also enter in the framework of this attempt to control a little bit this problem of the distractions and this problem of lack of attention that then affects directly the learning outcomes. So when we position ourselves, and Stephanie said very, very well that she will not tell policymakers with this report if they should or they should not ban smartphones, but she is giving us the full picture of this phenomenon. And really, the idea is that we can complement different measures in different amounts in order to achieve the best objectives. And this can be different from context to context. Bans can be solutions in a context, can create problems in another context, and there is still a lot to be experimented upon. At the same time, we have also now, thanks to Giovanni, clear research indicating that indeed starting too early can directly affect academic achievement. So then also here some form of cooperation, as highlighted by our attendees today also in the Padlet, is very important between families and wider communities and professionals. So since we are 2 minutes late, I'm now in a position that I really have to close the webinar. Thank you all for your contributions and all attendees for attending and for participating also very actively in the Padlet and in the chat. And you will receive further information with the webinar recording, presentations, and also the different resources that were shared today. Thank you all, and I wish you a great afternoon.